Room. All right, everybody. Okay, it's Wednesday, and you know what time it is. It's chasing gazillions. Not the same as making millions. Wednesdays with Fernando and Anthony. Well, like most Wednesdays, Anthony, because you know Fernando is like Waldo. He's traveling. And again, this Wednesday, Fernando is out in the Dominican Republic for his annual fellas to the DR. He says he's going to try to chime in for this special uh, episode we have today. So you want to be a developer in the DMV, so we hope Fernando is doing well, holding up one for us, Fernando. But you know when he's not here, you know what happens, right? I just drone on and I just take over the whole show and I just talk and drone on for an hour because without Fernando here, no one reins me in. I feel like it's my show. I can just talk about whatever it is I want to talk about. But that's what happened last time. And so what we've done is we've brought in this week to help keep me in check as only she can, Melinda Bowling, our special host who's stepping in today in place of Fernando. She's going to try to do her best Fernando impersonations to keep me in check. Yes, this is Melinda Bowling. Yes, the names are the same. We are related. This is the Melinda we always talk about on this show. Melinda Bowling, she is, what can I say about her while she's on the show? Nothing, because we talk about her behind her back. That's right. But hey, welcome to Chasing Gazillions. Not the same as making millions. Melinda Bowling, you've been a guest on this show. As you know, this is season 2, episode 11. You've been on this show where Fernando and I don't know, what is it? You were on the show as a guest last year when you were serving as the director of DPI in Prince George's County. You came on, you gave some great information about how to do business with the county. I tell you what, normally Fernando and I take the first few minutes to talk about our week. If there's anything new's been happening in our life, we talk about personal life. That's when I talk about you. That's when I talk about how much I love you. So I tell you what, why don't you go ahead, take a few minutes, tell us about, just like Fernando. Hey, Melinda, how was your week? Anything new going on with you personally, professionally, your children? Come on, this is time for you just to off the dome, dear. Just, what's been happening?
Well, good evening, and thank you for the invitation to serve as co-host this evening. I appreciate the opportunity. This week, the cherry blossoms were in full bloom here in Washington, D.C. It was absolutely gorgeous. Okay. And I had the opportunity to go down and be amongst the many, many tourists and long lines of traffic. But, since the pandemic, it was really kind of nice to see everybody out and enjoying it. It was gorgeous, especially Sunday. So that was the highlight of my weekend, is to enjoy the beautiful cherry blossoms here during the season in Washington, D.C.
In Washington, D.C. All right. Wonderful. Well, you're not a native Washingtonian. I'm the only one on the show who is a second-generation Washingtonian, lifelong Ward 7 resident. I always get that plug in. But you've been here in the city quite some time, enough to really appreciate and enjoy the cherry blossoms. And we all enjoy them. Well, that's all you got for is the highlight of your week? Nothing going on with your children? Nothing you want to share?
No, not this week.
Not this week?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. That's fine. All right. Well, I could drone on about, you can see right here, UVA didn't go deep in the tournament this year. Not so deep.
Now,
Again,
one of our
again,
neighbors was very excited about the U
the U,
going
I know.
further, right?
Yeah, they went deep. They went deep. Well, that's fine. All right. Well, I tell you what, then, dear. Because you're not Fernando and you don't really, you're not used to giving the banter back and forth. We're just going to bring on our guest then. This week, everybody, we got a special treat for you all. This week, we always hear on Chasing Gazzillions, not the same as Making Millions, Wednesdays with Fernando and Anthony. We're about bringing on individuals from across the globe, primarily from across DC, but we've had people on from Florida, New Orleans. I mean, so we do get people who come in from across the globe. But what is key to all of our guests and why we have such a growing following is that we bring on subject matter experts who talk off the dome. It's not scripted. They just are good at what they do, and they are here to share with you the good, the bad, the ugly about their industry, opportunities for other real estate professionals out here. So get your pad out, because this week, everybody, we have with us coming to the stage Marty Sullivan. Marty Sullivan from the law firm of Sullivan and Barros. Oh, also, I'm sorry. Let me do this because Melinda doesn't know to do this, Marty. We always give the guests the big screen. And then I end up underneath. I'm always underneath somebody here. And okay, it's a good place to be. I'm underneath Melinda, but we always like to give our guests the big screen. Marty, thank you so much for coming on to our show this evening. The chat box is open. We're getting chats. People are looking forward to asking you a lot of questions. But before we get into and letting them just bombard you, we want you to, know that this is an opportunity for you. Talk to your audience, talk to our audience. Tell the people first who you are, your family. You also get a chance to talk about your week and anything that's been going on with you and your family, because that's the kind of show we have. We're a family show. And then we'll get into the subject, because we know that your firm is a boutique firm, but with a big presence and a big footprint, particularly here in the zoning world. But come on, Marty, tell us about your week. Tell us about you. You're not a Washingtonian, are you?
I am not. No. I see you presumed that when you were saying you were the only native Washingtonian, but I'm a Pittsburgher.
Okay.
Actually. So I'm a proud Pittsburgher. It's really good to see you, Anthony. It's great to see you, Melinda.
Hi, Marty.
It's been
good
a long
to see you
time.
as well. Indeed. Indeed.
So my name's Marty Sullivan. I'm a zoning attorney. I specialize in zoning in DC, and our firm, Sullivan and Barros. My partner is Tony Barros. Tony and I worked together about 20 years ago at a firm called Wilkes Artis. And I started out as a tax attorney, actually, because I had my CPA license and I thought that's what I should do, right? And Tony and I were next to each other on our orientation on day one. My first day as a lawyer, Tony Barros was next to me. Now, he had already been a lawyer for a couple of years, but he had moved to this firm. And so we became friends then, and then that firm sort of blew up, and we went our different directions, and reconnected about 10 or 12 years later. And so we've been together now in this firm 12 or 13 years.
Okay.
And Tony handles transactional and litigation and leasing and contracts and all that kind of stuff, and I do just zoning. There's enough work in that in DC. Personally, I'm married and have 2 daughters in high school, a freshman and a junior. And so we're currently stressing with grades and sports and all that anguish. And sometimes I just wish they would just hurry up and get out of high school, and then I won't worry about it anymore.
Don't rush it, Marty.
So
Don't rush it. These are the good years, brother.
Oh,
We
no.
know. Our daughter is out of college and grad school. Our son is a junior in college. Don't rush. These are some good times for you, bro.
No, I do appreciate it. So, and it's a good time. It's a good time. So, with zoning, so as I said, I worked at Wilkes Artis, and then I was, I started out as a tax lawyer, but they had a big zoning presence. Wilkes Artis had most of the zoning attorneys in town at that time. And, I managed to move over into that group in less than a year after that. And so I did that and worked for some really great people, Phil Fiola, Allison Prince, Maureen Dwyer, John Epting, Paul Tummins. Worked with all those people and got really great education from them. And then I moved over to Shaw Pittman with Phil and Allison and Maureen and Paul. And that group's now at a firm called Goulston Storrs. But then I went in-house halfway through my career for a home builder, right at the time when you shouldn't be going to work for a home builder. 2006 it was, I think. And so a couple of years later, they didn't have a need for me anymore, as you would expect. and then I hung a shingle, and so ever since then I've had this zoning practice, and I just love it. It's so interesting. It's so fun. DC has a dizzying array of zoning rules and restrictions, and anybody that wants to build a building or add to a building or change a building or change a use, there's a lot to know about zoning. And probably the biggest problem is starting out. Somebody in that position doesn't know what they don't know. And so here we are. We help anybody from single family homeowners to small developers, and some bigger developers too, but mostly our wheelhouse is the small developer. I'd say from 1 to 30 units, or from 1 to 40 units is our wheelhouse. And really the smaller wheelhouse is probably from 1 to 10 or from 1 to 5.
Okay.
And it's an interesting market. I'm not sure how strong of a market it was when I was back at Wilkes Artis 20 years ago. It seems to, when I started in this practice, it seemed to be when the small developer, young developer, was hitting their stride. And with converting existing single families or apartment buildings into bigger apartment buildings, or converting them into apartment buildings. And so that's a big part of our practice. Okay. It always gets more and more interesting, because the Zoning Commission and the Office of Planning never make it simpler.
Right. So, well, we have someone from the regulatory side, the government side.
Yeah,
who has experience in that government.
Well, Melinda and I crossed paths early on, very early on.
Is that right?
Yeah, Philly pizza case. When I first started, I had to represent what I call opponents, or somebody that has a problem either with a developer or a business. I didn't have clients, so I had to take whatever work I could. And I represented this really great group of neighbors who were across the street from a business that I guess was a bit of a nuisance.
You called it Philly pizza?
Philly pizza, I think it was. Okay. Yeah. And
you're shaking your head, Melinda. You remember this case?
Oh, I'm sure she does. I'm sure she does. And Melinda and I think we're kind of actually on the same side, or Melinda may have been a referee. It wasn't. She didn't have sides.
What was your role in all of this at the time, Melinda?
I was at DCRA, representing the agency who had the enforcement responsibility. So that was me. and
Yeah.
trying to respond to citizens who were complaining against Marty's clients.
Yeah, so she was stuck in the middle.
Right.
And I remember, and I was new at handling this kind of matter on my own, and I think at one point I remember, like, I had to represent my clients, and my clients were really upset that enforcement wasn't happening faster, and so I remember Melinda was in the middle of that, and of course then she was the director after that. So I can't remember if our paths crossed so specifically after that, but obviously we were working in the same circles.
Yeah, well, when you come director, dude, you have minions. You have those other people who deal with ordinary folk like you and I down on the street. Hey, Marty, speaking of down on the street, talk to the audience about, I'm a small developer, because as a real estate professional, licensed broker here, representing individuals, small developers who are looking to buy, sell real estate here in DC and Maryland. Again, shameless plug, Anthony Bolden, real estate professional. But as I'm working with them and they are asking me to find them land, find them buildings, talk to that audience about when you should get involved, ideally, the best time, and what's the role then? If we just bought some land, they want to develop some houses, they just bought a 4-unit. I just talked to an investor yesterday. We're looking at 4 units. He says, hey, I can buy the plans to develop this into 16 units. I knew enough to say, hey man, are these plans really approved? Really? Because a lot of times they say they're approved, and then you go to DCRA, which is no longer DCRA, it's split in half, but you go down there and it's not. And so that's where I'm at right now. When should you be getting involved in this process? And what's that road that you will take our clients down?
Yeah, that's a great question. I should be getting involved before they purchase that property, of course, because they may purchase property thinking they can do something and find out they can't do what they want to do. And they may be surprised to know it's easier to, I sometimes I think about this, a homeowner sometimes has to be questioning, why do I have to hire a lawyer to build a deck and on the back of my house? Or even a developer has to ask, why do I have to have a lawyer to go from 1 unit to 2 units? But it's so, there's so many things to know, and you don't know what you don't know in the district. You call me before you buy anything. I put the work that I do into 3 buckets usually. One is due diligence. So I talk to people on the phone or I answer emails throughout the day. I'm looking at a property. Here's what I want to do. Can I do it? Or I'm looking at a property. Can you help me be creative and tell me what I might be able to do? Or how can I get to my vision despite the rules that are in the way? And so then that leads to the next bucket, which is the BZA, the Board of Zoning Adjustment. We do a lot of BZA cases, and that's often follows up on the due diligence question. No, you can't do what you want to do. However, you can go to the BZA and get what you want. Or here's another option. And a lot of times the answer is no. I say no a lot, and I feel bad about that, but not as bad as I would feel if I said yes and then I got a call a year later saying you gave me bad advice and now I'm in trouble. But it's really pretty amazing how far into trouble you can get, without knowing it. So it sometimes takes a 15-minute phone call, 10-minute phone call, or quick email back and forth with us.
And what does trouble feel like, Marty? Are we talking about financially? I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars that I can't get back, or are we talking about some minor penalty or fine from some local government agency that's going to give me a parking ticket?
Yeah, well, it's the range, of course. sometimes I get a call saying, "Hey, I'm closing on this property, and I'm gonna tomorrow, and I'm gonna convert it to 2 units, and I want to build something on top. I want to do addition." And I surprise them with, "Well, you can't have 2 units, first of all," and their financial projections, of course, may have counted on that. And that's that. The other thing is, a lot of people get to that. One thing that's really important is, just because your neighbor did it, or you see somebody down the street, "Hey, everybody here is popping up and building apartment buildings, so I'm sure I can do that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to buy this building."
Yeah, I think the word is it's grandfathered in.
Yeah,
I can do that.
yeah. So you'd be surprised what you can't do. I mean, when usually in a conversation I have with people, they're shocked to find out they can't do what they wanted to do or what they thought they could do, and they're surprised by how many different ways, how many different rules there are. As much as you hear in the city homage to housing and how we need to encourage housing, and we're working towards having more housing in the district. On the ground, it's hard to realize that sometimes. It's a tough job to be a developer in the district, and or to be a zoning administrator or a director of DOB, right? So there's a lot of rules, and it's easy for us to we have to be really careful. I mean, we just have, when we go over a project or go over due diligence, we go over it again and again, because the rules are always changing, never getting simpler. They don't take restrictions away, they just tweak them or make them more complicated. And so yeah, it's an adventure for sure, but the consequences are financial, or you just not being able to do what you set out to do when you bought a property.
Marty, I wanted to ask a question.
Go right ahead.
About accessory dwelling units. I feel as if more of them are popping up. Can you tell us what the status of it is in the District of Columbia?
Yeah, so accessory dwelling units or accessory apartments are permitted in the single family zones. So there's, in the district, in the residential zones, there's single family and multifamily zones, and the single families are like R1, 2, and 3. It's basically your detached house, your semi-detached house, and then your row house, in that order, for R1, 2, and 3. And in those zones, you can only have a one-family dwelling, but you can have an accessory apartment, and there are certain restrictions for that. The biggest one being that you have to, the owner of the property has to live in the principal building or principal dwelling, or in the accessory dwelling unit. So that's the biggest restriction. Then there's some size restrictions, like it can only be a third, about 35%, I think, of the total floor area can be the accessory apartment. So it's your English basement, or another. It's almost always your basement, because there's a size limit to the accessory apartment. But that owner can live in the accessory apartment too. It can also be in an accessory building. So it could be in a garage or a carriage house in the back. You can have an accessory apartment. So, and that is, we just did a case a couple of weeks ago where I have a client that has 2 units in the R3 zone, and which is known as a non-conforming use, because they had 2 principal dwelling units, and they had a certificate of occupancy that allowed them to have 2 units. But there's another rule that says if you have a non-conforming use, what that is, because it's 2 units in a 1-unit zone, you can't expand that use. So she couldn't do an addition to her house that she lived in, and we had to try to get a use variance, and use variances are difficult to get, and getting more and more difficult. And the board actually just pushed her into having an accessory apartment instead. So if she wants to expand her house, she's essentially forfeiting some rights. She has to go from a 2 principal dwelling units back to a principal dwelling unit and an accessory apartment, which is a little different in value because now if she sells it to somebody, she has to sell it to somebody that wants to live in it. So it can't really be operated as a business in a sense, other than the homeowner renting out the basement.
And
So it did become. I'm sorry.
And is that what's driving the restriction, the limitation on business activity in a residential zone?
Yeah, it's not that it's business activity so much. It's the one thing we don't see, I never see any developer building a single family with an accessory apartment. So I guess it doesn't pencil out. You know what I mean? I haven't come across it. I haven't seen a developer, when I explain to them, they come to me and say, I want to do 2 units. Well, you can only do 1 unit. You can do an accessory apartment, but you'd have to sell it to somebody that's going to live in it and rent it out. And they never seem to do that. So I guess it doesn't work as a starting point. It usually just works for the homeowner who wants some more income. So they want to, put a unit in their basement or a unit out in their carriage house.
Exactly. Now, I recently saw a property that appears to be building what looks to be a carriage house in their backyard. It's a separate dwelling. We presume that it's going to be an accessory use dwelling, a carriage house. Now, you're saying there's a size limitation, or are you saying that the occupant of that dwelling has to be related to the person's living in the primary? Give me the clarity on that again.
So the size limitation only applies when it's in the house, in the principal building.
Okay.
If it's in the accessory building, well, then you have a whole bunch of other requirements. The accessory building would have a building area, a footprint limit of 450 square feet if you were building it new. You may have to retain a parking space. So that could be a problem if you have a parking space, and it can be 2 stories now. It wasn't always that. That's new from the 2016 regulations, that it can be 2 stories and 22 feet in height now. It used to be limited to 15 feet in 1 story. So that's the only limitation on that. But yes, the owner of the property has to live in the accessory unit or in the principal unit, one or the other. I don't know how they enforce that. You could apply for, and there's no C of O that goes with that. So in the district, you don't need a C of O for a single family dwelling, and it's considered a single family dwelling with an accessory apartment. And unless they have changed that, and I don't know that they have, you don't get a C of O. So as far as anyone knows, you have a single family dwelling, you have an accessory apartment that got approved at some point because you got a building permit to build it out that way. What happens in the future? I've never heard of anybody enforcing that. So not that I'm telling anybody to do that.
I have another question. So you're probably familiar with the mayor working to expand residential dwellings in the downtown corridor. And there's a lot of talk of converting commercial buildings to residential buildings. Have you worked on any of those cases, and what are your thoughts about that concept?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a case like that now. It doesn't require a ton of zoning work. It's not going before the BZA or anything, but there's a place that we're working on. It's in the area of around 20th and M. It's always been offices. It's being converted to residential. I did see a BZA case a couple of weeks ago. They were asking for relief for something sort of unrelated. It was penthouse setback relief or something like that. But I think it was something like 700 units that they were creating on Connecticut Avenue. So it's actually happening. I mean, I've had some other clients ask me. It started about 2 years ago, because I don't do a ton of large work, and I don't do a ton of downtown work. But I had a client again in that 20th and M area buying an office building, a very large office building on M Street, and one of their big concerns was, we just need to know that we can convert this to residential if this doesn't work. So that was at that point, it was a backup. But then the zoning commission did make some changes to the regulations to facilitate that conversion. Specifically, and I always thought this was an interesting requirement, you may not have a lot occupancy limit for a commercial building. So you can build a commercial building at 100% lot occupancy, subject to some rear yard requirements or other requirements. But if you converted it to residential, then you have a lot occupancy limit. And there was always a question like, well, does that kick in? Like, do you need relief then if you're going to convert? So they kind of cleared that up as well. Just made sure that there were no zoning restrictions on the conversion from commercial to residential. But yeah, it sounds like
so if it goes residential, then they still get the 0 lot line?
Yeah, because the building would be, otherwise you'd have to chop the building back. So, and the use is never a problem. Like changing from commercial to residential is never a problem. Sometimes changing from residential to commercial obviously is a problem, but residential being a more favored use or a less restricted use, I guess, or the commercial being more restricted. There are some zones where the commercial is limited. The mixed use zones, for instance, in the most prominent mixed use zone, you can have an FAR of 2.5 total, but only 1.5 of that can be used for commercial. All of it can be used for residential. So even in the commercial zones, residential is one way to say it, it's more permitted or it's more permissible than commercial then. So it's always, the use is never a problem. Sometimes there's just some zoning restrictions, area restrictions that come into play, and the zoning commission kind of wiped that out, so it's no longer a concern. So yeah, it does seem like it's really happening. It's just good. I don't know what they're going to do with the buildings. I don't go to my office anymore. I know maybe it'll change again someday, but the few times that I have gone in, it's kind of sad to see, the city's not, we're on 15th Street, and it's usually there would be cars and horns beeping and you could hear cars and people, and it's just kind of quiet, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is quiet. I've noticed it when I've been downtown too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, you wonder how that'll trickle down. Like eventually it'll hit housing or maybe not,
Yes. So I didn't know about your career working for a home builder. And as you know, some of the large remaining parcels in the district are being redeveloped, right? Walter Reed, Berry Farm, St. Elizabeth's campus. Give us some of your insight from your days working for a home builder, what we could look to see coming there and some of the challenges for redeveloping it into a new residential, I guess maybe mixed use there.
Well, my time in a home builder, it was a single family home builder in Rockville that most of the homes that it built were in Prince George's County. Mid-Atlantic Builders was the name. You may have seen them around. Yeah. And and they were, when I got there, they were selling about 120, 150 homes a year. And when I left, I think they were down to like 20 a year. It was a rough time.
Real estate bust, I remember.
Yeah. But I don't know if, that experience it wasn't in the district, and it wasn't really even doing zoning work. It was a general counsel. Okay. So, I call those the lost years. There was two lost years.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Fair enough. Okay. Linda, anything else?
Marty, do you or have you done recently any IZ work or assisted or helped anybody with that kind of work, or is that not what you concentrate on?
We do that, and I have an associate, Alex Wilson, who's our IZ expert, and so I've kind of I probably should bone up on it myself a little bit, but I've sort of allocated all of that to her, and so she does that. Like on the front end, of course, developers have questions like how much space do I need to devote to IZ, and how many bedrooms can it be? And it's very complicated, of course. But also, she then gets involved when the permit plans are being developed, sits down together with the architect, and they go through the specific requirement to make sure that the IZ that's being provided is correct, or if it involves a contribution to a housing production trust fund, they'll work together on that, because that's a complicated. It's such a bureaucracy around it. I just sometimes I wish, like, why didn't they just tax the developer and then give the money to people and let them buy market units,
Yeah,
and then they would have a market rate unit too that could go up in value, as it is now. And IZ units don't go up in value, so if you're buying it, you're buying an asset that's not going to go up. But yeah. So, and the other thing we do with IZ, a lot of people have taken advantage of the ability to put habitable penthouse on top of certain buildings, and so you get free FAR for that. So you might have a building that's maxed out FAR, and you get an extra zero up to maybe 0.4 FAR on top of a building in the multifamily zones from RA2 up, and in the commercial zones as well. And you pay a fee for that. You pay into the Housing Production Trust Fund, but I have not come across a person that didn't opt to do that penthouse when they could get a substantial habitable penthouse on the roof. It was always worth the fee. So that was one area where the city actually, I think, was realizing real bonus density that wasn't there before they made those regs a few years ago.
Hey,
and
Marty,
now, of course, we've got one more thing. We've got IZ Plus, which is double IZ. So this is what you have to do when you're developing subsequent to a map amendment. And the great thing about this is it sort of incentivized the Office of Planning and the Zoning Commission to support map amendments. And so we've done several map amendments in the last couple of years where that I think maybe wouldn't have been supported before, but now, because you'll have a 20% IZ obligation instead of 10%, it's become something that they get excited about. The Office of Planning and the Zoning Commission has gotten excited about that.
Marty, we got a couple more questions, but before that, tell everybody what's the telephone number where they're going to reach you at Sullivan and Barros. Go slow.
Oh, thanks.
I'm the tech.
Okay. Okay. So the main number is 202-503-1700, and my direct line is 202-503-1704.
And do you have email?
I do. Email is msullivan@sullivanbarros.com. Barros is Barros.
Okay. And is there a website?
There is sullivanbarros.com. Yep. The photo needs updated. on the website.
Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's see if we. How's that look?
Perfect. Oh, no, yeah, just 1704 on the second one.
On the second number.
Se- 1704. Okay, how's that?
Looks great.
Okay, here on Chasing Gazzillions, not the same as Making Millions, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. If you know how to do restream and technical support and all this background stuff, give us a call because we are in need of it because I'm doing it. So help us out. Let's see who we know who this is. As always, Marty, you get a special one, man. You get a special treat here tonight, Marty. Look, it's the Virginia Bushcrafter, Marty. The Virginia Bushcrafter is our number one fan who has been with us since season 1, episode 1. He's always there making sure and watching out and giving us feedback on the qualities of our guests. And what did we say here? Of all the live streams that have come on every Wednesday at 7 Eastern Standard Time, I choose Fernando and Anthony because of the value they bring and always have great guests, Marty. Thank you, Virginia Bushcrafter. We love that guy. We love him. He was on our first show for season 2. He actually goes out into the bush. Nothing, like just and a little knife and chops tree twigs and bushes and lives out in the bush. And he teaches people how, because he raises the point. If you get it, we don't want you to get in an accident, but if you find yourself stranded out in the woods, what would you do? And he was saying, I think if I remember correctly, the number one thing to have is a lot of wood, a lot of tree limbs. Like I thought it was water, but not so much. It's the tree. It's the tree because you could fight off animals and then you can make fire. And there was a lot. Go to our our YouTube channel, Anthony Bowling Group YouTube channel, and watch the Virginia Bushcrafter show, and you will be amazed. But not as amazing as you, Marty. We love what you've been sharing with us. Let me ask you this question. We're always looking to try to get the freebies, and I know you like to take phone calls and give advice. So here's one. So you have a church in a residential neighborhood, and they have, in addition to the sanctuary, on their lot, one lot and square, one lot, they have both a sanctuary building and a separate building that maybe once in a while was an apartment, but for right now has been used most recently as an educational school, as a school. The school, in fact, back in 2015, when they came to occupy the building and use it as a school, went to BZA and was able to obtain a special exception to occupy and function in that building as a school. And they did so until they outgrew the school or moved on and they left the building. Now the church, looking for new revenue, is looking to bring other potential businesses into this space, which on its face looks like office space, classroom, training space, right? Has space, looks like a cafeteria, no kitchen, no hood, no oven, but it does have a ramped area to that lower multi-purpose room. And the rest of the floors floors 1, 2, and 3 just have rooms. Let's call it 11 rooms and 7 bathrooms. Let's just say. So they want to lease the space, and different potential prospective tenants have come up and said, hey, I'd like to do something in this space. Maybe I'd like to do an adult daycare. Maybe I'd like to do office stuff, primarily office use. With that information, and of course, the church is happy having engaged a top real estate professional to represent them in the leasing of that space. Let's say, what do you have to say to those potential tenants, as well as the church, about one, is something grandfathered in from when that school was there and that school got their special exception through BZA that now will allow any subsequent user of the space to be, quote, grandfathered in, or two, forget about the school and what C of O they obtained. It's in the R2 zone. The next user wants to use it for general office use. Will they have to go to BCA, or can they just go to the new DCRA and obtain a C of O? And if so, what's the use that will be permitted as a matter of right? Or is it that anybody who wants to go into this space and use it for anything other than church use is going to have to go back to BZA? That's a lot. I hope you're taking notes.
Yeah. I was taking mental notes, yes.
All right. We're trying to get it all out of you tonight, Marty.
So the easy answer is the school. If somebody could come in and do the school, and it's not technically grandfathered, it's that the school use has been approved by the BZA. Presumably, what I would do in this case is I would go to the zoning map,
and you would
I
see
would
that
look
BZA
up the address.
case.
I would see a BZA case, and I would open the BZA order. Yeah,
you would.
And I would see, and I would make sure what are the particulars of that, or what are the conditions of that order. The conditions could be there could be a limit on the number of kids. There could be conditions around traffic and parking, have a certain number of parking spaces, or pickup and drop off is done a certain way. And there could also be a time limit on that order. So if a use like that, and then there should be a certificate of occupancy. So once they got the special exception from the BZA, they should have gone, and they probably have a C of O.
They do.
And so, so the C of O, and the C of O probably says daycare or private school, subject to BZA order X. And
well, actually, the church has C of O for the sanctuary and C of O for the building. The use is church.
Oh, on the C of O, so it doesn't say school.
It does say education. It does say use, educational, training, and maybe it says the word school, but it does say that.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because in the R2 zone, so now we're going down the rabbit hole here. It was in the RF zone, which used to be the R4 zone, is the first zone where a church building can be used for daycare as a matter of right. But in the single family zones, in any single family zone, even the most restrictive, you can have daycare and private schools by special exception. So you can go to the BZA and get those approved. And
all subsequent occupants will need to travel the road of BZA?
Well, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. No. So a BZA approvals run with the land. So they stay with the property owner, not a user. They stay with that property. So if somebody got approval to run a private school or a daycare under certain conditions, and then they quit, they no longer use that, and they move on as a tenant, you bring in another tenant, if they can fit into that. Now, hopefully there's not a 3-year period in between the uses. So if it stays dormant, if that BZA use is dormant for 3 years, then you might have an issue. The rule is
the time that the occupant relinquished the space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule on that. The rule is that if there's an intention to abandon the use, and the 3 years is your safe harbor. So if you replace that use within 3 years, then it's presumed that you didn't abandon the use. There could be a situation where it goes more than 3 years, but the owner says, "Well, I never abandoned the use. I've been searching for a tenant." I just
had a pandemic and it just ran everybody out.
Yeah, and that would be like one of those tricky questions for the zoning administrator, where he would make the call, because I have had the previous zoning administrator have had some situations where we could show evidence that we didn't abandon the use, even though it was more than 3 years. So that would be the first thing.
Right.
Probably the easiest thing. And then if they do have to go back to BZA, that's not usually a difficult case. And I wouldn't be surprised if Melinda has some experience with this or just knows about this. 10, 15, 20 years ago, private schools and daycares were they were like nuclear power plants sometimes for neighbors. They really fought. There were some real famous, knock down, drag them out cases. I remember Phil Fiola, older lawyer who's retired now. I think it was, I don't know if it was the Field School or, there was a private school where the neighbors would, on the day that the school was doing traffic study for their BZA case, there were neighbor opponents who were driving around in order to up the traffic numbers, and they were busted by a policeman that was hired by the school to direct traffic, and he said, "I've seen these same people driving around." So they were, but these days, that seems to totally change the environment for that, I think. Okay. For the most part. And
educational.
And if you go to BZA, like everybody, they value, we have a need for daycare. And so, the last daycare case I did it was 60 kids in a church in Tacoma area, I think it was. And we had 4 neighbor opponents, and they had the usual complaints about noise and traffic, and they got nowhere with the BZA. The BZA was not hearing it. They knew, like, this is important. So that's the first.
I wanted that would apply to the next one. Adult daycare, same building, same fact pattern.
Yeah, that's a little different, but yeah, it would be. It'd still be approvable by special exception at BZA. It depend on what that means, I guess. What the population is in the adult daycare. But for office, no. Like if somebody came in and I just want to do offices, wouldn't be able to do that. There are, if it's a religious based thing, then we're in a gray area. As far as the church goes, if it was offices related to the church, the rules are pretty liberal about.
If it was office related
allowing,
to the primary church, the owner church.
Yes.
But if it was another entity that was also religious.
Hold on, excuse me. I got something playing on my end for some reason. Where's that coming from? Jeez. It's one of my iPads. Sorry about that. It's my Professor of Rock video on YouTube just coming up for no reason though.
So yeah, not a problem. That's how this show is. We like it. It's all unscripted and off the dome.
Ball for you.
No, what we're saying is that if it was another entity that had a quote religious hue, they had ministry or something. They're not related to the church owner, but they are churchy. The ultimate question is, except for a straight office user, are all other potential tenants on their way to the BZA to get a C of O to operate in this building? Is anybody, as a matter of right, whatever rights that are there, able to go down to the DCRA, which is now Department of Licensing and Permitting? Are they able to go down there and say, hey?
There are some. Like, for instance, religious or clerical use. Clerical use is one of them, or clerical home. So for up to 15 people. So if this were, say, up in the Brookland area, then it's possible that maybe some religious order could use it as a home for 15 people. And there's, there's a line in the permitted use that says for religious institutional use, but they really mean churches. So a religious organization that, say, had nonprofit offices wouldn't necessarily be permitted in there. And then it might depend on the size of the. It's a gray area when it comes to the religious thing. If it could be related to the church.
Sure. Let me ask you this, Marty, because I want to make this referral to you. Who am I referring to you in this case? Is it the church who owns the building that's looking to lease it to someone, or is it the potential tenant looking to come into this space that is going to benefit most, coming to you to get counsel and advice about this transaction and this journey that one of them is on the road to?
Usually it would be the tenant, because in my experience, the tenant is responsible in a lease. In most leases, the tenant's responsible for getting their approvals. But of course, it comes back on the owner if they can't get their approvals, right? Because they're not going to be able to pay the rent. So we will get hired sometimes by people who say, I'm getting ready to sell my property, and I want to know what the developer knows. What I want to know generally what my property's worth. And I don't want a developer coming in and tell me, oh, you can't do that, and here's why I think the price should be lower. And then, but typically we're representing a potential user of a property, a potential tenant, or a buyer of a property.
Great. Well, I think I'm gonna refer the client. The church has hired me. I spoke with them today on this matter. I think they're open to it, and they would benefit greatly from a discussion with you about their property, the zone it's in, and what any potential user is facing in order to lease this space, whether they're going to BZA or not, whether it's going to be an exception, whatever it is. I think you can provide them with that answer.
Yeah, it's good. We would take a little bit deeper dive and get a list of uses so that they would know, and then have some answers for them, because undoubtedly the potential tenant's going to ask first, what can I do here?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
the church could say, well, I'm not your zoning attorney, so I won't go check this out for yourself, but here's what we think you can do here. And then they're not wasting their time too.
Everybody, this has been Marty Sullivan of Sullivan and Barros, local zoning expert, attorney here in the DMV, sharing with you over 25 years of knowledge and experience here on how to get your deals done. That's his number, his email. He's got partners. I know his partner, Tony Barros. He and I went to UVA together. He's a good man. The best. Tony Barros, the best. We're looking for you to come on the show, Tony. Anyway.
All right, I'll have to tell him. I'll get him on here.
That's right. We love that you came on the show, Marty. Thank you so much. We had a great time. You gave some great information, and you are going to be a blessing to my client, this church. I'm going to send this episode to them. They need to watch it. They need to call you and get in touch with you about this property here, and have you give them the proper solutions, so that I can lease it, and then I can, because she likes it when I do a transaction. She always with the where's the transaction up here. I'm not saying no names, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, that's why we do what we do, right?
That's what we do. What we do. Everybody, this has been Chasing Gazzillions. Not the same as Making Millions. Wednesdays with Fernando, whenever he's not in the Dominican Republic, and Anthony, always here. And we with a special guest host tonight, Melinda Bowling, and no, the other way. There you go. Our Marty Sullivan, our guest who came on tonight. We had a great time, Marty.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. It was a blast, and it was so good to see you both.
Good to see you too, Marty.
Yeah.
All the best, my friend.
Okay, take care.
All right.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.